I might just be bad at my job or things are changing. We'll find out. This presentation is called Hacking Failures, and it's both about hacking failures and about turning failures into something useful, hopefully. I want to share some red team stories and perspectives. I want to sort of have an open discussion about the state of red teaming and the state of penetration testing in our cybersecurity industry. And I want to sort of try to build common ground between attack and defense. I sort of worry about the us versus them mentality that has, I think, pervaded the industry for a while. And I also want to speculate about the future. I am a tester at BHIS. I've been a client-facing pen tester since 2013, so about 10 years of experience on the pen testing side of things. Basically, I've been doing pretty much exclusively red teams for about 4 years and also purple teams. We've got a motley crew here. We've got Beau, basically cloud extraordinaire. I mean, if you build a cloud, he will destroy it. You've got Ralph, infrastructure man. He just spins up a phishing infrastructure in 5 minutes so that we can burn it in 5 minutes. And then Steve's just he would do this for free, which is honestly just scary.
Yes, that's the scariest thing I ever. Yeah.
But we're all kind of red teaming here at BHIS, and so the word team, it's team. So we all kind of use our expertise and try to make clients hurt together, and oftentimes don't succeed. And that's kind of what this is about. But I wanted to kind of talk about sort of the backstory of how we got here. How did we get to 2023 red teaming? And I have some glossary stuff on the left there if you don't know what some of these acronyms mean. But the early days, maybe in Steve's era, when people started knocking on doors and asking how we got into their server, I think the question was kind of, what is security? Security was an afterthought. So this is think mid 90s or super early, all the way up until I'd say basically the release of Metasploit. Security was an afterthought. Security was yeah, I mean, why would someone want to log into our server that doesn't use it? It was kind of just it may be something that admins thought about, but there was there was very rare to be dedicated security people. It was just sort of it was a side note. Then I think we entered this I would call it the Metasploit era. So this is essentially attacker TTPs are amazing. They're really good. You could walk into an environment, scan with Metasploit, find 10 exploitable things, type, set target, blah, 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 and then type run, and you have a shell.
Don't forget DB autopwn, right?
Yeah, DB autopwn,
well, and also on the phishing side too, just C2,
yes.
Just creating a basic payload with MSF Venom worked,
just throw it in
an email and just they click in it. It's yeah, I got C2. Easy peasy.
Yes, right. So the Metasploit era,
Interpreter
that's
session
when
opened.
Yes, exactly. Interpreter session, and then 50 other interpreter sessions, right? There was Adobe and Flash. You just send someone a PDF, they open it, you get a shell. It was bad. So that was the Metasploit era, and that was when I sort of got into the industry. When I got into pen testing, attackers TTPs were better than blue team TTPs. We had Metasploit, we had there was not that many SIMs, there wasn't EDR, there wasn't big security teams. It was usually just one guy being yeah, I think we're screwed. So yeah. Then we entered, I would call it the Cobalt Strike era. So this is when attacker tools sort of took that next step past Metasploit. This is the beginning of EDR. This is the beginning of things like email gateways, more certain tactics were getting wiped off the table. I would say during that era, we were sort of evenly matched. It was blow for blow. You had, your EDR, but it was set up in alert only mode, or it didn't work if you use 3 zip files deep, or there was a lot of simpler, but or certain vendors you could just rename the DLL and the EDR just gets neutered. There was a lot more bypasses.
There was also, it was probably maybe 2-3 years where EDR wasn't even a thing yet. It wasn't we had Cobalt Strike, right, where we had a good C2, but EDR wasn't a thing yet. So McAfee and all these other antivirus were just kind of getting laid out, laid on the side of the road pretty much.
For sure. I would honestly, maybe this is I don't know if this is necessarily true, but I would claim that EDR came to common adoption because of tools like Cobalt Strike.
Yes.
Because people got sick of walking into an environment, getting all this access, and the defenders being like, yeah, we have no way to stop this thing. And then they went to their vendors and said, stop it.
Yeah. Or we got an alert and we can't respond to it. So like the typical response back then was just nuke the machine, right? Take it offline.
Some dude just comes
Nuke
around
it.
the corner and pulls it from the plug. And
Yeah.
Oh yeah, seriously, we've disconnected your implant, right?
Yeah, and
Yeah,
even like slightly before EDR too, like behavioral analysis and app whitelisting were like the two really big things that were being pushed like right at the tail end of like when AV was still like kind of okay. And I think the problem was that, to deploy app whitelisting was like too difficult, behavior analysis too noisy. So like they were like, oh, well, what if we combine these two kind of into this, AV behavioral analysis kind of thing, right? And that's kind of where EDR kind of came from.
Yeah, and so that leads us into sort of what I'm considering now, which is the EDR era, which I will just say your TTPs are better than ours. And when I say your versus ours, I'm saying your as in you're the blue teamers and ours as in we're the red teamers. But basically, you have companies that are $billion+ in investment. Like, spoiler alert, Help Systems is not collecting billions of dollars in Series A funding for Cobalt Strike. Like, and like, Metasploit, the open source developers are not getting millions or billions per month in Series B funding. Like, not only that, but also blue teams are getting bigger. And like some of our customers will have a blue team of 8, 10, 12 people. Before, it was one guy who's like, yeah, I'm an admin. I do security too. A lot of companies now have huge security teams, 24/7 coverage, or they outsource it. And you have like, CrowdStrike Overwatch as an example, which is like you have this EDR, but then they also have a team of people that are employed to look through the EDR data and find stuff manually. So basically, I think we're to the point now where if you combine your TTPs all together, blue team TTPs are better than red team TTPs. It's how we fail. A lot of these things are sort of from the perspective of the most secure organizations. Like I said, I am biased. At Black Hills specifically, we have a tendency to work with repeat customers because we have awesome, loyal customers. And that means that they know our bag of tricks. They know our things that we're going to do that are pen testery things. And if they're repeat customers, they've already fixed a lot of the stuff we used last year. So it basically, no, this is biased. If you're talking about an organization that has limited budget, limited security tooling, this isn't necessarily going to apply. But you have things that are outside our control. So I mentioned security tools are good and they're getting better. Response times are getting so low, like, Log4j patched in 30 days, like across the board pretty much. You have better security awareness. This might seem like a lie, but the truth is that security awareness has increased significantly over the past 5 years or even 10 years. And also I mentioned defensive staffing increases and security integrations and non-security tools. So like a lot of cloud stuff is a great example. It's not really a security tool itself, but by its nature, it has security built into it. Like it has a trust model that you have to set. Or like one of my favorite things now is like default credentials have mostly gone away. Most companies don't build tools with default credentials anymore. They have randomized default credentials, or they have, a sticker on the bottom of the Wi-Fi router, whatever it is. There is more security awareness in tools that aren't security related, I think now, and that impacts things. And also just increasing complexity. That totally goes with cloud. If you're used to on-prem environments, now you bring in this hybrid environment. You have a BYOD environment with MDM or Intune or something. You have these like hybrid machines where it's like, is this part of the environment? You have to bring in a whole set of different tools if you're working with a customer that has cloud. And most customers do have both. It's just basically complexity is going up. And also like the usage of third-party applications and software as a service stuff has also added a lot of complexity to testing. Let's say a customer heavily uses SAP or like Oracle Business Cloud or something. There's a tool to like go in there and find all the vulnerabilities, but maybe not. I mean, like that might not exist in those software as a service companies are their own individual little pieces of sort of the exploit puzzle. So those are all things that I think are outside our control. Is there anything else like that you like, ways that we commonly struggle that aren't within our control that I forgot?
Testing restrictions that may be outside of our control, client or
Timing.
customer policies and procedures that they have to abide by to limit us to doing what we're able to do, things like that.
Yeah. So things within our control. Let's go on that. So if we do use the same bag of tricks as last year, that is an area that we mess up sometimes. And it is like, it's kind of by necessity, because at the end of the day, there's only so much you can learn as an attacker within a certain amount of time. And that applies to the blue team as well. Like, if we're using a new tactic that you've never observed before, it's going to be much more difficult to defend against it. Likewise, if we're trying to hack a new technology we've never seen, it's going to be harder to build attacks for it. I also said hacking in production. What I mean by this is sometimes if time frames are limited, we'll just drop into, we'll basically test payloads without testing payloads. We'll just drop payloads into an environment, or we'll create an account, or we'll do something that sort of we just hope doesn't get detected. Also bad scoping, like Steve said, we have some control over this. Setting really unnecessary restrictions, not giving assumed compromise. Anytime that scoping involves stealth as a success measure, that's a bad scoping. Like, if stealth is the success of the engagement, that is a badly scoped engagement, because stealth is not, like, it's basically not really a thing we can deliver reliably. And I'll talk about why and all that kind of thing in a bit. That's how those are some high level ways that we fail. Now let's talk about a case study of a specific failure. Essentially, the background here was Steve and I were basically tasked with phishing a large number of customers. We have currently sort of a pool of customers that we're working with. And so we kind of sat down and said, okay, what can we come up with that's reliable? Like the old reliable, the classic campaign that's going to work. So here's the campaign that Steve and I designed. And I'd like to remind everyone that Steve's class is awesome. And Steve is like the expert on initial access. So like you're talking, this isn't just like something I made up on the seat of my pants. This is tested techniques that Steve's been teaching. These are real, sort of documented. And also in some cases, Steve developed these techniques. So it's not like this is just like, oh, we spoofed an email that said you got a free iPad or whatever. So here's the phishing campaign we came up with. We had an aged and categorized domain with valid SPF and DKIM. That was one method we were using to send. We also had a newly registered generic Office 365 tenant. And we also had direct sending, which that's a technique that Steve has documented in blog posts. It's essentially abuses a Microsoft feature where they can have themselves and trusted senders, which leads to, if you connect directly to Office 365, you can send essentially spoofing. So we had a few different ways to send. Targeting, we had validated users. So we used, techniques like Teams and Office 365 to validate the exact emails we were going to hit. We were hitting low numbers of users, and we had high delay and jitter. So I think we wait like 5 to 30 seconds in between targets, or even longer. So, we're not sending to the entire company. We're not hitting everyone. The ruse was the classic device code phish. I think the email said something like, your device is lost sync with Office 365. Press here to resync it or whatever. That email looked super legitimate. It was copied from a Microsoft template. So it literally, we just took the HTML from a legitimate Microsoft email, modified it. And then we also built a landing page that the users would hit that was cloud hosted, valid SSL certificate, valid category. That page essentially used some JavaScript to generate these device codes, which this is all documented in Steve's Git and blog posts. But essentially, device codes have a timeout of about 15 minutes. So using this landing page allows us to have some security in front of our phish, and it also allows us to collect metrics, but it allows people to click the phish with more than 15 minutes later, and it will work. And then the device code login is a legitimate Microsoft service. This is not a phishing page that we host. This is a real Microsoft hosted page. The domain is Microsoft. Everything is, everything's real.
Yeah, it's as easy as telling the user to go to Microsoft.com device login, and we just give them a code, they sign in, and then we get their access. So pretty easy.
This is just an example of like, if red teamers sat down today and came up with a reliable phish. This is a sort of tried and true technique that works pretty much in any environment and will, work almost everywhere. So what was the results of this campaign? We sent it to 4 companies. At the first company, a user reported the phish in 2 minutes, and only the first 6 emails landed, and the remainder were quarantined automatically by Proofpoint. So not only was it reported in 2 minutes, and when it was reported, the incident response team immediately yanked it out of inboxes. The first 6 emails landed in user inboxes. Those people, one of those 6 reported it.
Mhm.
So, and then the remainder were quarantined. So that company, we basically waxed it. It's done. Like, that phishing campaign's failed. The second company, emails made it to inboxes. They got reported within about 30 minutes. And then after they were reported, they were removed from everyone's inboxes. So at that point, we didn't have any access, and we waxed that company off our list. Next, all the messages quarantined. This was actually the direct send technique. This is a great example of, like, although the direct send would work, when we hit it in this manner, it just quarantined all the messages. So it's an example of, like, we can't control how this spoofing technique is going to work. And that, obviously, since they were all quarantined, no one even made it. It didn't make it to the inbox. We got no interaction. The last company, they were delivered to inboxes, they were reported, and they were removed from it. So the same as company 2. And then, so basically, 0 interaction from this campaign that 5 years ago would have had like a 40 to 60% hit rate at least. Like, we would always get 40%, 30% was like average, 40% was like good, and you could easily go above 50%. So it's just crazy how things have changed. So I guess, like, how did we end up in this world where a phishing campaign that 5 years ago would have been access to 40% of the targets to today, 0? I think, like I said, user security awareness has slowly improved, and these attacks require more complexity because of the nature of the security tools we're bypassing. So you have many more steps for the users to be like, is this a good idea to open this email? Okay, maybe. At some point in the past, that point when they open the email is the point where we get the shell. Like, that was, that it's, and even with recent CVEs, like, that was a thing.
I think at some point along the way, probably when we switched from Cobalt Strike, even this, I think you said, until the last phase there, or era, so to speak, that we're currently in, it went from, hackers only have to be right one time, and the defenders have to be right all the time. I think that's a fallacy now. I think that's almost flipped to where the hackers, we have to be right almost all the time, or we're going to end up in a situation like this where it's detected, blocked, remediated, kicked us out of the network, whatever. There's so many different layers of technology because of the things that we've done before to help, drive the industry forward.
For sure.
Such as like AMSI and PowerShell and things like that, because of like PowerShell Empire and the prevalence of it was doing. So
yeah, and it's
user
totally
awareness improved, and the technical complexity, for sure.
And a lot of the improvements have come because companies have been reading our pen test reports, and they've been going back to the vendors and saying, how can you let this happen? And so the vendors are under this pressure to essentially make it impossible. So
may have had a few emails from Microsoft in the past over
here. Yeah, for sure. And I get it. Like, if you are spending, if you are spending $1,000 a seat on a tool, it better be stopping some attacks, right? We talked about the, more chances for users. Email gateways are becoming very effective. Not only, are they doing good with like automatic quarantining or just using the whole like concept of, safe senders and all that, but also they have like this pre-flight URL checking feature, which is awesome. That's an additional thing. Before you even get to click the link, they've already scanned it. And they've also, every time someone clicks, it replaces that link to basically check it every single time. So it's like very down to the device, down to the user level checking of that, like, exact link. And we've even seen, like, we've tried to bypass this, of course. You could put like a CAPTCHA in front of it, but the problem is a lot of them are configured to just fail closed, which means if it can't reach the page and confirm that it's safe, it'll just assume it's unsafe. So, and
So-
attachments are basically dead. Like, I mean, you can get certain attachments through, but it's really kind of down to the company. And almost every company we hit with attachments, they're like, yeah, this is blocked forever now. So, which is great for them. But for us, we're like, well, have we used ISOs against this one company before? Because if we have,
Yeah, it's the thing. Like, have we tried it? Because you'd be like, well, ISOs are dead. Well, have you tried it against this company? So there's things that we have to try. But then we have things like the webcast we did with sending RDP files. So we can't lean on these email gateways like they're EDRs or like they're the last stop defense or the only stop defense. We have to do those layers, right? So I just like to say that, don't rely on these to block all emails, because at the end of the day, we eventually find a way, right, to get landing in the inbox. Like the case that we showed earlier said, we landed in the inboxes, but then the defensive products kicked in. So there's a delay there.
There was also years where they weren't even scanning the URLs if you didn't make it a tag, right? So like, I mean, there have been ways to get by it, but
yes, and there still are. Like what we do now is we put them in PDFs. Right?
Yeah,
but
that's what attackers
again, you
do
have
too.
to be able. It's an attachment, and like that user has to open the attachment.
Yeah.
It's not as convenient as before. One click own. So, basically, also security teams know how to respond quickly. Phishing is a great example. Security teams are all trained on phishing. They know how to do it. They get the phish, they investigate it, they pull it out of inboxes. That's like a 10, 15, 30-minute process for most security teams. That is a very small window to be working with as an attacker.
So that actually reminded me of one thing I wanted to bring up in the whole red team tiers kind of thing. So right along the same lines, like the story you just mentioned, like Epic, infrastructure build, had what I thought were, decent, templates and rules and everything. And honestly, this is one of my favorite times I ever got burned, because I got burned before I ever actually even sent a phishing mail. And so what had happened was the organization had domain doppelgänger protections. So they had a company that was basically like looking at registrations, right? And I had registered a company name that was similar enough to their company name, right? So they had some alerting mechanism trigger. It's like, oh, hey, this is weird. Some organization just registered something similar to you. Oh, and they spun up some MX records. And so what they ended up doing is, like, I spent like, probably like half a day building out just the infrastructure, testing the phishing message, making sure it landed in my inbox, making sure it landed in, another tester's inbox, just to make sure like the things were working, right? And they had already routed every email from that domain directly to their SOC. So when I went to actually phish, nothing landed in any inboxes, and everything went directly to their SOC.
Oh wow!
Yeah, no, I
that's
mean,
a case of you got to be right every time, right?
Yes, 100%. And like that's a great, and we have had that happen as well. Like, so for this little group of customers that we're talking about, we did the same thing. We registered a doppelganger domain like on the first day of the engagement, and like 75% of them caught it. So like. And also, they all set it to takedown immediately. Not only did they just route it to null, they also sent it to legal takedown, right?
So that's another thing. Like, I've actually gotten cease and desist.
Yeah. Oh yeah. No, I'm in all kinds of UDRP proceedings over here. But yeah, basically, yeah, and like truthfully. The defense in depth thing is real. Like, we're talking about it in it's real. Like, not only did we have, and let's say it succeeded, right? So let's say that they click the link. There's still conditional access. There's still like potentially security controls on these device codes that prevent them from being used for evil things. Even if we get what we wanted from the phish, there could be defenses, not to mention all the other things, doppelganger protection. And I'd also like to throw in, depending on what you're hosting as a phishing page, Microsoft will actively scan it and delete it. Like, they will scan you, find your thing, find your hosting page, and take down your entire subscription. So like, you could be just like, I'm preparing my phish and my whole subscription's gone.
Yeah.
Crap.
My
Like,
subscription
seriously.
canceled so many times, it's ridiculous.
So
Just
like,
keep adding new credit cards.
yeah, that's the same thing about like the, security integrations into non-security tools. Azure is scanning for phishing before we even involve the customers. So that's like a tough, it makes our jobs harder, which, yes, this is red team tiers. So yes, we're just complaining about how our jobs are hard.
My job was just easier.
And I know I want to take a second to say, blue teamers, you are all amazing. I know your jobs are equally hard, if not harder. I don't want to take away from that. I'm not saying it's not us versus them, but we're just sort of complaining because that's what we do.
Thanks for watching. Don't miss part 2 of this series coming up next.
So EDR behavior is the definition of insanity.